The first time Marcus Hathaway held his daughter, he felt nothing but rage. Not at her, never at her, but at the universe that had delivered this cruel joke. His empire stretched across 3 continents. His name commanded respect in boardrooms from New York to Singapore. And yet he couldn't buy what mattered most. His daughter Isabel came into the world on a rain-soaked October evening with eyes that would never see him. The doctors had explained it with clinical detachment. Bilateral optic nerve hyperplasia. Severe and irreversible. She would live in darkness forever. His wife Celeste hadn't lasted 6 months after that diagnosis. She'd kissed Isabel's forehead one morning, told Marcus she couldn't do this anymore, and by noon her lawyer had delivered divorce papers. The tabloids feasted on it for weeks. Celeste Moreau Hathaway, former runway model, abandoning her disabled infant. Marcus had paid them off eventually, buried the story, but the wound festered. That was 7 years ago. Now Marcus stood in his penthouse office on the 42nd floor, watching the sunrise bleed across Manhattan's skyline, and wondered if he'd made a single right decision since. Isabel was his world, his reason for breathing, but she lived in a prison of his own making. He'd hired the best specialists, the most qualified nannies, the top orientation and mobility instructors. He'd childproofed the penthouse until it resembled a padded facility, more than a home. And still she seemed to retreat further into herself each year. The knock on his door was soft, almost apologetic. "Come in," Marcus said without turning. He heard the shuffle of worn shoes on marble, distinctive, hesitant. That would be Rosa. His assistant Margaret had hired her 3 weeks ago, against his explicit instructions. Marcus had told her he wanted someone with credentials, someone from an agency, not some middle-aged woman with a resume that consisted of housekeeping jobs and a reference letter from a priest. But Isabel's previous nanny had quit after Isabel's nightmares had gotten worse, and Marcus had been in Tokyo, closing a merger. Margaret had made the call. By the time Marcus returned, Rosa Delgado had already moved into the staff quarters and somehow convinced Isabel to eat a full meal for the first time in days. Marcus had planned to fire her immediately. That was 3 weeks ago, and he still hadn't done it. "Mr. Hathaway," Rosa said quietly, "Isabel is asking for you. She wants to know if you'll have breakfast with her." He turned to face her. Rosa was perhaps 50, with greying hair pulled back in a neat bun, and a face that had known hardship but not bitterness. She wore a simple navy dress, the uniform Margaret had ordered for all household staff, but somehow it looked wrong on her. Too formal for someone who radiated warmth the way others radiated authority. "I have a conference call in 10 minutes, Marcus said. Rosa nodded, unsurprised. "I'll tell her." "Wait." The word escaped before he could stop it. Rosa paused, her dark eyes patient. Marcus felt something twist in his chest. "Tell her. Tell her I'll be down in 20 minutes. Rosa's smile was like sunlight through clouds. "She'll be very happy to hear that, Mr. Hathaway." After she left, Marcus stood alone in his office and wondered when he'd become the kind of father who needed permission to have breakfast with his own daughter. The dining room was absurdly large for 2 people, or even 10. The table could seat 20, all imported Italian marble and polished mahogany. Isabel sat at one end in her favourite chair, the one with extra cushions that Rosa had somehow procured, and Marcus took his usual seat, 3 chairs down. It was Rosa who'd pointed out gently that perhaps he might sit closer. So now he sat directly across from Isabel, close enough to see the constellation of freckles across her nose, the way her sightless eyes tracked towards sounds with eerie precision. "Good morning, sweetheart," Marcus said. Isabel's face lit up. "Daddy? Rosa said you might be too busy." "I'm never too busy for you." The lie tasted bitter. How many times had he said that, then disappeared into his office for 12 hours? "Rosa made cinnamon pancakes," Isabel announced. "She says they're shaped like butterflies, but I have to feel them to know. Can I, Daddy? Can I touch my food?" Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Every specialist, every therapist had told him not to baby her, to let her develop independence, but it was Rosa who actually practiced it. Of course you can. He watched as Isabel's small fingers traced the edges of her pancake, mapping its shape with the concentration of a cartographer. She smiled when she found the wings, the body Rosa had somehow crafted from batter. It is a butterfly, Isabel breathed. Rosa appeared from the kitchen carrying a coffee pot, her movements quiet and efficient. She poured Marcus's coffee, black, no sugar, exactly as he preferred, though he'd never told her, and placed a small pitcher of warm syrup near Isabel's plate. "The syrup is at 2 o'clock, mi amor," Rosa said softly, "and your orange juice at 10. "Thank you, Rosa." Isabel reached confidently for both, barely spilling a drop. Marcus had never seen her so self-assured at the table. With the previous nanny, every meal had been an exercise in frustration, Isabel growing increasingly agitated as food was placed in front of her without context, as if she was supposed to intuit through sheer force of will where everything sat. "Rosa," Marcus said slowly, "how did you learn to do that?" "The clock method." Rosa glanced up, surprised he'd asked. "My younger brother, Mr. Hathaway. He lost his sight in an accident when he was 12. He taught me many things." "I didn't see that in your file." "You didn't ask to see my file, sir." There was no reproach in her voice, just fact. Marcus felt the rebuke anyway. He'd made Margaret handle the hiring, hadn't even glanced at Rosa's background. For all he knew, she could be anyone. But Isabel was eating, laughing, telling Rosa about a dream she'd had where she could fly, and Rosa was listening. Not just hearing, but listening with her whole attention in a way that made Marcus realize how rarely anyone did that anymore. "Daddy, can Rosa take me to the park today?" Isabel asked suddenly. "Sweetheart, you know that's not—" "Please. She says there's a pond with ducks and they make funny sounds. I want to hear them." Marcus's first instinct was to refuse. The park meant exposure, meant risk. Strangers who might recognize him. Photographers who might snap pictures of his blind daughter, pitying looks from people who thought they understood his life. But Rosa was watching him with those patient eyes, and Isabel's face was so full of hope. "All right," he heard himself say. "But Peter drives you, and Daniel goes along." Peter was his personal driver, Daniel his head of security. Isabel clapped her hands, syrup-sticky and joyful. "Thank you, Daddy." After breakfast, Marcus retreated to his office for the conference call, but found himself distracted, watching through the window as Rosa helped Isabel into her coat by the car. She was teaching Isabel to zip it herself, her hands guiding but not doing the work. Patient. Thorough. His phone buzzed. Margaret's face appeared on the screen. "Marcus, I have the quarterly reports ready for your review. Also, Celeste's lawyer called. She wants to arrange a visit." Marcus felt ice shoot through his veins. "No." "Marcus, I said no. She gave up that right when she walked out. Legally, she still has I don't care what she has legally. Find a way to make this go away, Margaret. That's why I pay you." He hung up before she could respond, then stood gripping his desk until his knuckles went white. Celeste. After 7 years of silence, of pretending Isabel didn't exist, now she wanted back in. The gall of it, the absolute arrogance. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Hathaway, your 9:30 is here." Marcus forced himself to focus. Business. Numbers. Things he could control. But even through 3 hours of meetings, he kept checking his phone, waiting for Peter's text that they were back home safe. They returned just after lunch, and Marcus heard Isabel before he saw her, squealing with delight in the elevator lobby, Rosa's gentle laughter following. "Daddy, Daddy, they were so loud. The ducks, they went whack, 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 just like Rosa said. And one splashed water, and I felt it on my face." She crashed into his legs, hugging him with sticky hands that smelled like pond water and breadcrumbs. Marcus looked over her head at Rosa, who was smiling with quiet satisfaction. "We had a good morning," Rosa said simply. That evening, after Isabel was bathed and changed into pajamas, Rosa knocked on Marcus's office door again. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Mr. Hathaway, but I wanted to ask, would it be all right if I read to Isabel before bed?" She asked for a story. "She has audiobooks," Marcus said automatically. "State-of-the-art system, thousands of titles." "Yes, sir, but she asked if I would read to her. With my voice." Marcus felt something in his chest crack. When was the last time he'd read to her? 2 months ago? 3? "Of course," he said quietly. "Whatever she wants." He tried to work after that but couldn't concentrate. Finally, he found himself walking down the hall toward Isabel's room, drawn by the sound of Rosa's voice. And the little prince said, "What makes the desert beautiful is that somewhere it hides a well." Marcus stopped in the doorway. Isabel lay in her bed, her face turned toward Rosa's voice, absolutely rapt. Rosa sat in the chair beside her, holding a worn paperback that looked like it had been read 1,000 times. "Rosa," Isabel said softly, "what does a desert look like?" Marcus tensed, waiting for the careful explanation, the reminder that Isabel would never see one. But Rosa just said, "Close your eyes." "Oh, wait, you already do that." She laughed, and Isabel giggled. "All right, imagine everything is quiet. So quiet you can hear your heartbeat, and it's warm, very warm, like being wrapped in the biggest, softest blanket. And under your feet, imagine the sand is like flour, very soft and fine, that shifts when you walk. Can you imagine that?" "I think so," Isabel whispered. "Good. That's the desert. It's a place that feels empty but isn't, because if you're patient, if you listen and feel, you find the hidden things, the wells, the life." Marcus felt his throat tighten. He'd spent 7 years trying to compensate for what Isabel couldn't do, and here was Rosa teaching her to imagine worlds he'd forgotten existed. "Mr. Hathaway," Rosa said softly, noticing him. "Would you like to say good night?" He stepped into the room, awkward and uncertain. Isabel heard his footsteps and smiled. "Daddy, Rosa's reading about a little prince who lives on an asteroid. Did you know asteroids are real? Rosa says you can learn all about them if I want." "Of course that they're real," Marcus said, sitting on the edge of her bed. "And you can learn about anything you want. Will you come back tomorrow for breakfast?" "I'll try, sweetheart." "Rosa says trying is good, but doing is better." Isabel's voice was drowsy now, fading towards sleep. Marcus glanced at Rosa, who had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "Rosa's right," he said finally. "I'll be there for breakfast. That's a promise." Isabel smiled and was asleep within seconds, her breathing deepening into the rhythm of dreams. Marcus stood carefully, motioning for Rosa to follow him into the hallway. Once the door was closed, he turned to face her. "Where did you learn that? The desert description?" Rosa hesitated. "I've worked with children for many years, Mr. Hathaway. All children, not just those who can't see. They all need help imagining worlds beyond what they know." "You're different from the others," Marcus said. It wasn't a question. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I simply have more practice at seeing what's actually in front of me." "What does that mean?" Rosa met his gaze steadily. "It means I see a little girl who's brilliant and brave and hungry to explore the world. And I see a father who loves her so much it terrifies him. Fear is natural, Mr. Hathaway, but it cannot become a cage." No one had spoken to him like that in years. Marcus was accustomed to deference, to people carefully measuring their words around his temper and his power. But Rosa stood there, 50-something and fearless, and told him the truth he'd been avoiding. "She's vulnerable," Marcus said, hating how defensive he sounded. "The world isn't kind to people like her." "No," Rosa agreed, "it isn't. But hiding her away won't change that. It will only make her smaller. You have given her safety, Mr. Hathaway. Now you must give her wings." After Rosa left, Marcus stood in the hallway for a long time, staring at Isabel's closed door. His phone buzzed. A text from his brother Christopher. Asterisk, still on for lunch Friday. Haven't seen you in months. Marcus had been avoiding Christopher, avoiding everyone, really. His brother was everything Marcus wasn't. Charming, easygoing, the golden child who'd rejected their father's business empire to become a pediatric surgeon. Christopher had married his college sweetheart, had 3 healthy children, lived in a brownstone in Brooklyn, and seemed genuinely happy. Marcus had always envied him for that. Now the envy tasted like poison. He texted back, "Can't work." Christopher's response came immediately. Asterisk, you always say that, and how's Isabel? Marcus stared at the question, then turned off his phone without answering. The next morning, true to his promise, Marcus sat down for breakfast. And the morning after that, and the one after that. It became a routine, this small act of presence, and he was startled by how much Isabel bloomed under it. She talked more, asked endless questions, told him about everything Rosa was teaching her, how to identify birds by their calls, how to organize her clothes by texture so she could dress herself, how to count steps between rooms to build a mental map of their home. Rosa says I'm going to be independent one day, Isabel announced during breakfast on Friday morning. She says blind doesn't mean helpless. Rosa's right, Marcus said and meant it. Daddy, Rosa wants to take me to a class, for kids like me, where they teach special things. Isabel's voice was eager but uncertain. Can I go? Marcus's first instinct was to refuse. A class meant other people, meant exposing Isabel to situations he couldn't control. But he thought of Rosa's words, asterisk. Fear cannot become a cage. What kind of class? He asked. Rosa appeared from the kitchen as if summoned. It's a mobility and life skills program, Mr. Hathaway, run through the Lighthouse Guild. Twice a week, children ages 5 to 10. They learn cane travel, braille, adaptive technology, but also how to play, how to make friends who understand their experiences. Friends? Marcus felt his chest tighten. Isabel had no friends. How could she, locked in this tower? Children need peers, Mr. Hathaway. Isabel is isolated here. She's safe here. She's lonely here. Rosa's voice was gentle but firm. I know you want to protect her, but protection and isolation are not the same thing. Marcus looked at Isabel, who was holding her breath, waiting for his answer. All right, he said finally. We'll try it. But I'm coming with you. At least the first time. Isabel's face split into a grin so wide it made Marcus's heart ache. Really? Really, really? Really, really, Marcus confirmed and wondered what he'd just agreed to. The Lighthouse Guild occupied a building in Midtown that was nothing like Marcus expected. It wasn't institutional or cold, but warm and full of life. Children's artwork covered the walls, tactile collages, raised line drawings, sculptures made from clay and wire. A girl about Isabel's age rushed past them in the hallway, white cane sweeping confidently ahead of her, calling out to a friend. Marcus felt disoriented, like he'd stepped into an alternate universe where blindness was simply one characteristic among many, not the defining tragedy he'd made it into. Mr. Hathaway, welcome. A woman approached, hand extended. I'm Dr. Patricia Chen, director of our youth programs. You must be Isabel. Isabel nodded shyly, gripping Rosa's hand. We're so glad you're joining us. Rosa told me a bit about you. You like stories, is that right? Yes, Isabel whispered. Especially about adventures. Well, you're in luck. Today we're starting a unit on orientation and mobility, which is basically learning to go on adventures safely. Want to meet the other kids? Isabel looked up at Rosa, who squeezed her hand. Go ahead, mi amor. I'll be right here. Marcus watched his daughter walk away with Dr. Chen, his heart in his throat. A boy called out a greeting to Isabel, and she turned toward his voice, startled but curious. She'll be fine, Rosa said softly beside him. You don't know that. I know that she's braver than you think. Children often are. They sat in the observation area, a room with one-way glass that let parents watch without interfering. Marcus saw Isabel being introduced to 5 other children, all around her age, all blind or visually impaired. They were laughing, talking over each other, completely at ease. An instructor brought out white canes sized for children, and Marcus watched as Isabel was fitted for her first one. She held it awkwardly at first, then more confidently as the instructor showed her the proper technique. 2-point touch, the instructor was saying. Sweep left, sweep right, always one step ahead of where you're walking. The cane is your friend, not your enemy. It gives you information. Isabel practiced, her face serious with concentration. Then she took a step, sweeping the cane ahead of her, and smiled when it worked exactly as promised. Marcus felt something break open inside him. How had he never thought to give her this? A tool, simple and powerful, that could give her freedom. Because you wanted to carry her everywhere, a voice whispered in his mind. Because letting her navigate the world meant admitting you can't control everything. Mr. Hathaway, Rosa said quietly, may I tell you about my brother? Marcus tore his gaze from Isabel. Your brother who lost his sight? Yes, Miguel. He was 12 when it happened, a car accident. For a year he was angry, depressed. He thought his life was over. My parents didn't know what to do. They treated him like glass, like he might break. What changed? A teacher, Rosa said simply. A blind teacher who came to his school. She taught him Braille, taught him to use a cane, taught him that blind people live full lives. They work, travel, raise families. She taught him that blindness is not the end of the world, just a different way of moving through it. Where is he now? Rosa smiled. He's a lawyer in Los Angeles. Married, 2 children. He hikes. He surfs. Yes, blind people surf, Mr. Hathaway. And he's happy. Truly happy. Because someone taught him how to live. Not just survive. Marcus watched Isabel laughing with another child, their canes clicking in rhythm as they practiced together. I've been doing everything wrong, he said. No, Rosa corrected gently. You've been doing everything out of love, but love must evolve. What Isabel needed at birth is not what she needs now. She needs to grow, to fall, to succeed on her own terms. Your job is no longer to carry her. It's to teach her to walk. That night, Marcus did something he hadn't done in years. He Googled successful blind people. The results were overwhelming. Scientists, musicians, athletes, politicians, writers, people who'd climbed mountains, earned PhDs, raised families, lived extraordinary lives. How had he never looked for this before? How had he let his fear shrink the possibilities for his daughter's future into something so small? He was still reading when Margaret called. Marcus, I'm sorry to bother you at home, but we have a situation. Celeste's lawyer filed a motion with the court. They're requesting formal visitation rights, claiming you've denied her access to her daughter. Marcus's blood went cold. She abandoned Isabel. Legally, she didn't. She retained partial custody in the divorce. You've been ignoring it because she never exercised her rights. Now she wants to. Why now? What does she want? I don't know, but Marcus, she has a case. The court may compel you to allow visits. Marcus closed his laptop so hard it nearly cracked. Find out what she's really after, Margaret. People like Celeste don't do anything without an agenda. After he hung up, Marcus sat in his dark office, rage and fear warring in his chest. Celeste. Beautiful, cold Celeste, who'd looked at their newborn daughter and seen only disappointment, who'd left without a backward glance. Now she wanted back in Isabel's life, over his dead body. But even as he thought it, a small voice whispered, maybe Isabel deserves to know her mother. He silenced it viciously. Celeste had given up that right. She didn't deserve Isabel. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk Marcus. We need to talk about Isabel. I'm her mother. You can't keep her from me forever. See? So she had his personal number now, of course she did. Money bought access, everything. He blocked the number and went to check on Isabel. She was asleep. One arm curled around the stuffed elephant Rosa had given her. her new cane propped carefully against the nightstand. She looked peaceful, happy. Marcus would burn the world down before he let Celeste destroy that. The next week blurred past in a strange duality. Marcus found himself attending more breakfasts, even the occasional dinner. Rosa was teaching Isabel to set the table, to pour her own water, to navigate the penthouse with her cane. The once quiet home filled with the sounds of Isabel's laughter, her questions, her increasingly confident footsteps. But beneath it all, Celeste's lawsuit loomed like a storm cloud. Margaret dug into Celeste's recent history and found interesting details. She'd remarried 2 years ago, some European count or duke. Marcus didn't care about the specifics. The marriage had fallen apart publicly and spectacularly 6 months ago. Now Celeste was back in New York, living off alimony and apparently seeking redemption through motherhood. "She's been doing interviews," Margaret reported during their weekly meeting. "Soft pieces about how much she regrets leaving, how she's changed, how she wants to repair her relationship with Isabel. She's rebranding herself as the reformed mother who lost her way." "It's a PR stunt," Marcus said flatly. "Maybe, but it's working. Public opinion is starting to shift in her favor. Billionaire keeps sick daughter from her repentant mother. That's the narrative she's building. Isabel isn't sick, she's blind. And Celeste isn't repentant, she's opportunistic. Can you prove that?" Marcus had no answer. That evening, Rosa asked to speak with him privately. They sat in his office, the city lights glittering 42 stories below. "Mr. Hathaway, Isabel asked me today why she doesn't have a mother." Marcus felt like he'd been punched. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that families come in all shapes, and what matters is love, not structure." "But Marcus—" She paused, using his first name for the first time. She's starting to notice. The other children at her class, they talk about their mothers. She's beginning to feel that absence. "Her mother left her," Marcus said harshly. "She doesn't get to waltz back in now." "I'm not suggesting she should. I'm only saying that Isabel is asking questions you'll need to answer soon. Better she hears the truth from you than pieces it together from silence." Marcus knew Rosa was right, but the thought of explaining Celeste's abandonment to Isabel made him feel sick. "I'll tell her," he said finally, "when the time is right. Don't wait too long. Children sense secrets, and they imagine things far worse than reality." 2 days later, Marcus received a court summons. A hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks from now to determine Celeste's visitation rights. His lawyers assured him they could fight it, delay it, make it expensive and painful for Celeste. But they couldn't guarantee they'd win. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He wandered the penthouse, checking on Isabel 3 times, finding her peacefully asleep each time. Finally, he ended up in the kitchen, where he found Rosa making tea. "Chamomile," she said, offering him a cup. "For sleep." "I'm not sleeping," Marcus admitted. They sat at the kitchen island, the only sound the quiet hum of the city beyond the windows. "Rosa, can I ask you something? About faith?" She looked surprised but nodded. "Of course. You wear a cross, you go to church on Sundays, I've seen it on your schedule. Do you really believe there's someone listening? Someone who cares?" Rosa smiled sadly. "You're asking if I believe in God." "Yes, Mr. Hathaway, I do." "How? With everything wrong in the world, with children born blind, and mothers who abandon them, and—" He stopped, his voice breaking. "How do you believe in something good when everything feels broken?" "Because I've seen miracles," Rosa said simply. "Not the dramatic kind from stories, the quiet ones. A child learning to trust again, a father finding his way back to his daughter, a blind boy who grows up to be a happy man. These are miracles too." "I would give anything to fix Isabel's eyes," Marcus whispered. "Anything. I've consulted every specialist, explored every experimental treatment, nothing works. What kind of God creates a child only to take away her sight?" "I don't know," Rosa said honestly. I don't understand God's plans any better than you do, but I know that Isabel is not broken, Marcus. She's different, yes, but she's whole. She's perfect. She doesn't need fixing. How can you say that? She'll never see a sunset, never read a book, never see a sunset with her eyes, Rosa corrected. But she experiences the world in ways you and I never will. She hears nuances in voices we miss. She feels textures we overlook. She builds pictures in her mind more vivid than any photograph. Her world is not smaller, Marcus. It's different. And there is beauty in difference. Marcus wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that Isabel's blindness was somehow part of a plan, that it meant something beyond random cruelty. But he couldn't. Not yet. Will you do something for me? Rosa asked. Tomorrow morning, spend an hour with Isabel with your eyes closed. Let her guide you through her world. See what she experiences. That's not the same. No, it's not. But it might help you understand that what you see as tragedy, she may not. She's never known sight, Marcus. This is her normal. And in her normal, there is joy. Marcus didn't promise, but the next morning, after breakfast, he found himself asking Isabel if she'd like to play a game. What kind of game? She asked eagerly. A trust game. I'm going to close my eyes, and you're going to guide me around the penthouse. Show me your world. Isabel's face lit up. Really? You want to see how I see? Yes, sweetheart. Teach me. And so began the strangest hour of Marcus's life. Isabel took his hand and led him through their home, describing everything not by sight, but by sensation. The kitchen was the smell of Rosa's cinnamon and coffee, the cool marble under his feet. The living room was the soft rug that changed to hard wood 3 steps from the couch, the way voices echoed off the high ceilings. You have to listen, Daddy, Isabel instructed seriously. The penthouse talks if you listen. Hear that hum? That's the refrigerator. And that clicking? That's the thermostat. And when Rosa walks, her shoes sound different than Margaret's because Rosa's are softer. Marcus stumbled twice, disoriented without his vision. Both times Isabel steadied him patiently. It's okay, Daddy. Everyone falls at first. You just have to trust your other senses. They work even when you can't see. By the end of the hour, Marcus's respect for his daughter had multiplied 1,000-fold. She navigated their enormous penthouse with confidence, her mental map more accurate than many sighted people's. She knew exactly how many steps from her room to the kitchen, where every piece of furniture sat, which doors stuck and which swung free. When he finally opened his eyes, Isabel was watching him with her face tilted up, a knowing smile on her lips. You see now? She asked. I'm not lost, Daddy. I know exactly where I am. Marcus knelt down and pulled her into a fierce hug. Yes, sweetheart. I see. But even as he held her, his mind was on Celeste, on the court date looming, on the threat to this precious, fragile peace they'd built. He would not let Celeste destroy this, whatever it took. The hearing was scheduled for a Monday morning. Marcus's lawyers had prepared extensively, gathering evidence of Celeste's abandonment, her failure to pay child support or even send a birthday card. They'd paint her as an opportunist seeking headlines and sympathy. The Thursday before, Celeste's lawyer called Margaret with an offer. Drop the court case if Marcus agreed to supervised visits, starting with 1 hour per month. Marcus's immediate instinct was to refuse, but his lawyers pointed out that if the court ruled in Celeste's favor, she might get unsupervised visits, possibly weekends. 1 hour supervised on our terms, his lead attorney advised. It's better than gambling with a judge. Marcus hated it. Every fiber of his being screamed against it, but logic won. He agreed. Now he had to tell Isabel. He'd been putting it off, but Rosa was right. Secrets grew toxic in silence. That evening, after Rosa had put Isabel to bed, Marcus went to her room and sat on the edge of her mattress. Isabel, honey, are you still awake? Yes, Daddy. She turned toward his voice, her face peaceful in the dim nightlight. I need to talk to you about something important. About your mother. Isabel went very still. The mother who went away? Yes. How did you… Rosa told me that some mothers live with their children and some don't, but that doesn't mean they don't love them. Is my mother like that? Marcus felt a surge of gratitude for Rosa's careful words. I don't know if she loves you, sweetheart. I hope she does. But she went away when you were very little, and she hasn't been here since. Why? The question he'd been dreading. Marcus chose his words carefully. Sometimes people get scared, and sometimes when they're scared, they run away instead of staying to work through fear. Was she scared of me? Not of you, never of you, maybe scared of not knowing how to be your mother. Oh, Isabel processed this. Is she coming back? She wants to meet you. Not to live here, but to visit sometimes. Would that be okay? Isabel was quiet for a long moment. Will Rosa still be here? Of course. Rosa's not going anywhere. Then okay. I'll meet her. Rosa says everyone deserves a second chance. Marcus made a mental note to ask Rosa to stop being quite so wise. He kissed Isabel's forehead and left her to sleep, but he knew he wouldn't be so lucky. The thought of Celeste in the same room as Isabel made his skin crawl. But he'd given his word. 1 hour, supervised. He could endure that for Isabel's sake. He didn't expect what happened next. The visitation was scheduled for the following Saturday, 2 o'clock in the penthouse living room. Marcus had insisted on his territory, his rules. Margaret would be present, along with Rosa and Marcus himself. Celeste could have 1 hour, not a minute more. At 1:55 p.m., the front desk called up. Mr. Hathaway, Miss Moreau is here. She'd dropped his name from hers. Marcus noted that with grim satisfaction. When Celeste stepped off the elevator, Marcus barely recognized her. The years had been kind superficially. She was still beautiful, still model thin with that perfect bone structure that photographs loved. But there was something hard in her eyes now, something brittle in her smile. Marcus, she said, extending a hand as if they were business associates. He didn't take it. You have 1 hour. Rosa and I will be present the entire time. You don't touch Isabel without her permission. Clear. Something flashed in Celeste's eyes. Anger, maybe, or wounded pride, but she smoothed it away. Of course, I only want to talk with her. Rosa appeared from the hallway with Isabel, who was dressed in her favorite purple dress, her hair carefully braided. She held her cane confidently in one hand and Rosa's hand with the other. Mama, Rosa said softly, there's someone here to see you. Isabel turned towards where Celeste stood, her expression uncertain. Hello, she said politely, the way Rosa had taught her. Celeste made a sound, half sob, half gasp. Isabel, my baby, you're so big. I'm 7, Isabel said matter-of-factly. Are you my mother? Yes, sweetheart. I'm your mother. Why did you go away? The question hit like a bullet. Marcus watched Celeste's face cycle through emotions, shock, pain, guilt. I made a mistake, darling. I was young and scared and I didn't know how to… I'm so sorry. I should never have left. It's okay, Isabel said, with a child's easy forgiveness that made Marcus's chest ache. Everyone makes mistakes. Rosa says what matters is what you do after. Celeste looked at Rosa for the first time, really looked at her. You're the maid? I'm Rosa, Rosa said calmly. I help care for Isabel. Carl. Something shifted in Celeste's expression, something Marcus couldn't quite read, but it was gone quickly, replaced by a smile aimed at Isabel. Would you like to sit with me, sweetheart? Tell me about yourself. They sat on the couch, Isabel perched on the edge, Celeste beside her with hands clasped tight in her lap, as if afraid to reach out. Marcus stood against the wall, arms crossed, watching every move. Shh. Isabel talked about her classes at Lighthouse Guild, about the books Rosa read to her, about the ducks in the park. She was animated, happy, completely herself. And Celeste listened, but Marcus noticed her gaze kept drifting to Rosa. Not to him, not to Margaret, but to Rosa, as if something about the woman bothered her. The hour passed quickly. When it was over, Celeste stood, her movements reluctant. Can I come again? She asked Isabel. I guess so, Isabel said, if Daddy says it's okay. Celeste's eyes shot to Marcus, cold and calculating. I'm sure your daddy will allow it, since we have an agreement. After she left, Isabel turned to Marcus. She's sad, Daddy. I could hear it in her voice. Maybe, Marcus said noncommittally. She smells like flowers, expensive flowers, like the ones in your office. Trust Isabel to notice through scent what others missed through sight. That night, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Celeste had been too controlled, too careful. And those looks she'd given Rosa. He pushed the thought away. 1 hour a month. He could survive that. But 3 days later, everything changed. Marcus was in a board meeting when Margaret's call came through. He ignored it once, twice. On the third call, he excused himself and stepped into the hallway. This better be urgent, Margaret. Marcus, you need to come home, now. His blood went cold. What happened? Is Isabel? Isabel's fine, but there are police here. And Child Protective Services. Celeste filed a complaint. They're investigating the home environment. Marcus's world tilted. What? She's claiming negligence. She says Isabel's being cared for by unqualified staff, that the penthouse is unsafe for a blind child, that you're never home. Marcus, they're talking to Isabel right now. He ran. 42 floors had never seemed so far. Marcus burst out of the elevator to find his living room full of strangers. 2 police officers, a woman with a CPS badge, Margaret looking furious, and Rosa standing pale and stricken in the corner. Where's Isabel? Marcus demanded. The CPS agent, a tired-looking woman in her 40s, turned to him. Mr. Hathaway? I'm Agent Davies. Your daughter is in her room with one of my colleagues. We're just asking her some questions. Without me present, she's 7 years old. It's standard protocol, Mr. Hathaway. We need to talk to children without parental influence to get accurate information. Marcus wanted to tear the place apart, but he forced himself to stay calm. Losing control would only make things worse. What exactly are you investigating? Agent Davies consulted her notes. We received a complaint from Celeste Moreau regarding your daughter's living conditions. Specifically, concerns about inadequate supervision, unsafe environment, and care being provided by unqualified individuals. Her eyes flicked to Rosa. That's absurd, Marcus said. Isabel receives excellent care. Miss Moreau provided photographs showing various hazards, sharp corners, stairs without adequate railings, open access to high balconies. For a blind child, these present serious risks. Marcus felt rage building. This penthouse has been assessed by mobility specialists. Everything is arranged for Isabel's safety. We'll need documentation of that. Also, Miss Moreau claims that Isabel's primary caregiver, she glanced at her notes, Rosa Delgado, has no formal training in special education or disability services. Rosa has years of experience. Personal experience isn't same as professional credentials, Meister Hathaway. And Miss Moreau is concerned that her daughter's education and development are being handled by household staff, rather than certified professionals. Marcus saw Celeste's game now, saw it with crystal clarity. She wasn't trying to get Isabel back. She was trying to destroy everything Marcus had built, to prove him an unfit parent so that Celeste could swoop in as the concerned mother. I want to see my daughter, Marcus said, his voice dangerously quiet. In a moment. First I need to... Now. Something in his tone made Agent Davies reconsider. She nodded to one of the police officers, who went down the hall and returned a minute later with Isabel and another CPS agent. Isabel looked small and frightened, her cane gripped tight in one hand. "Daddy!" Marcus knelt down, pulling her into his arms. "I'm here, sweetheart. Everything's okay." "They asked me lots of questions," Isabel whispered. "About if I'm happy. About Rosa. About if you're here." Marcus's arms tightened around her. Over her head, he met the CPS agent's eyes and saw something there. Sympathy, maybe, or recognition of a father's love. The agent with Isabel handed a tablet to Agent Davies, who read it with an expression Marcus couldn't decipher. Finally, she looked up. "Mr. Hathaway, based on our preliminary assessment, we don't see evidence of immediate danger. However, we'll need to conduct a full home inspection and review Isabel's medical and educational records. We'll also need verification of Miss Delgado's background and qualifications." "Anything you need," Marcus said. "But I want it on record that this complaint is being made by a woman who abandoned her daughter at 6 months old and hasn't seen her in 7 years until last week. This is retaliation, not concern." Agent Davies's expression suggested she'd already considered that possibility. "We evaluate all complaints on their merits, regardless of who makes them. Someone will be in touch to schedule the full assessment. In the meantime, you're free to continue your normal routines." After they left, Marcus stood in his violated home and felt fury unlike anything he'd known. Celeste had done this, had brought the full weight of the state down on his family as punishment for... what? Daring to build a life without her? Rosa approached carefully. "Mr. Hathaway, I should leave. I'm causing problems for you and Isabel." "You will do no such thing," Marcus said fiercely. "This isn't about you. It's about Celeste trying to hurt me through Isabel. But if they find that I don't have formal credentials, then we'll get you certified. Whatever they need." "You're not going anywhere, Rosa. Isabel needs you. I need you." Rosa's eyes shimmered with tears. "Thank you, sir." That night, after Isabel was asleep, Marcus called his lawyers and told them to destroy Celeste Moreau. He didn't care what it cost. He didn't care how ugly it got. She'd crossed a line. But his lead attorney had bad news. "Marcus, CPS investigations create public records. Even if they find nothing, the fact that one was opened will be in the system. Celeste's lawyers can use this to paint you as a father under investigation. It weakens your position. So what do I do? Cooperate fully. Document everything. Show them that Isabel is thriving. And Marcus, you might want to consider letting Celeste have more access. Continued fighting only makes you look unreasonable." Marcus wanted to throw his phone across the room. Instead, he said, "Set up a meeting with her lawyers. Let's see what she really wants." Because this wasn't about Isabel. It never had been. Celeste wanted something, and Marcus needed to find out what before she burned his whole world down to get it. The meeting was set for 2 days later. Marcus spent those days getting his affairs in order, documenting every aspect of Isabel's care, gathering letters from her teachers at Lighthouse Guild, attesting to her progress. So, when he finally sat across from Celeste and her attorney in a conference room at his lawyer's office, Marcus had his armor on. "Let's skip the pleasantries," he said. "What do you want, Celeste?" She had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable. Then her mask slipped back into place. "I want my daughter, Marcus. I want to be part of her life. You've kept her from me." "You kept yourself from her. I didn't have to do anything." "I made a mistake. I was 23 years old, overwhelmed." "You were 25, Marcus corrected coldly, "and you weren't overwhelmed. You were disappointed. I heard what you said to the doctor. What's the point of having a defective child? Those were your exact words." Celeste paled. "I didn't... That's not... I was in shock." "You were honest, for once in your life. Now you want back in because your second marriage failed and you need a new story to sell to the public. So I'll ask again. What do you want?" Celeste's lawyer cleared his throat. Mr. Hathaway, my client is seeking shared custody. Week on, week off. As is her right as Isabel's mother. Marcus laughed, a harsh sound without humour. Absolutely not. Then we'll let the court decide, and Marcus? Celeste leaned forward. That CPS report is just the beginning. I can make things very difficult for you. Or we can work this out like adults. You don't want Isabel, Marcus sneered. You've made that abundantly clear. So what's your price? How much to go away and stay away? Something flickered in Celeste's eyes, triumph, quickly hidden. I don't want your money, Marcus. Everyone wants money. Name your number. But even as he said it, Marcus knew he'd miscalculated, because Celeste smiled slow and cruel, and he realized she'd been waiting for this moment. I don't want money, she repeated. I want the house in St. Bart's, the one we bought together that's still in your name. Sign it over to me and I'll drop the custody suit. I'll even make the CPS complaint go away. Marcus sat back, understanding booming. The house in St. Bart's was worth $30 million. Celeste didn't want Isabel. She wanted real estate. You're using our daughter as leverage in a property dispute, he said softly. I'm securing my future, Celeste corrected. Something I should have done 7 years ago. So what's it going to be, Marcus? The house? Or months of court battles that will hurt Isabel far more than they hurt me? Marcus looked at his daughter's mother and saw a stranger. Had she always been this cold? Or had he simply been too blinded by her beauty to notice? I need time to think, he said. You have 48 hours. After that, my lawyer files for emergency custody based on the CPS concerns. Tick-tock, Marcus. Just howl. Marcus drove home, through Manhattan traffic in a daze. $30 million, a house he'd visited maybe 3 times since the divorce. But it was the principle of the thing. Giving Celeste anything felt like rewarding her cruelty. But if he didn't, the custody battle would drag on for months. Isabel would be questioned, evaluated, pulled apart by lawyers and experts. She'd learn exactly how much her mother didn't want her, had only used her as a bargaining chip. When he got home, Rose was reading to Isabel in the living room, their evening ritual. Marcus stood in the doorway and watched them, his daughter's face rapt with attention, Rose's voice bringing the story to life. This was what mattered, not houses or money or pride. He'd give Celeste the damn house. He'd give her anything if it meant protecting this. But that night, as Marcus lay awake staring at his ceiling, something Rosa had said weeks ago echoed in his mind. I've seen miracles. Not the dramatic kind from stories, the quiet ones. And for the first time in 7 years, Marcus Hathaway found himself praying. Not to any specific god, not with any real faith or expectation, just a desperate plea thrown into the void. Asterisk, please, don't let her take my daughter, please. He didn't expect an answer. But the next morning, everything changed. Marcus woke to his phone ringing at 6 a.m. Margaret's voice was strained. Marcus, turn on the news. Channel 7, now. He grabbed the remote with a sense of dread, clicked to the channel and stopped breathing. Celeste's face filled the screen, not in a puff piece about motherhood, but in a very different context. The Chiron read, Model Celeste Moreau under investigation for insurance fraud. Sources confirm that Moreau allegedly staged a burglary at her Manhattan apartment last month, claiming over $2 million in stolen jewelry that investigators now believe never existed. If charged, she could face up to 10 years. Marcus sat down hard on the bed. Margaret, he said into the phone, his voice shaking. Tell me this is real. It's real. The story broke an hour ago. The FBI's been investigating her for months, apparently. They finally have enough evidence to move forward. Insurance fraud. If convicted, Celeste would have a criminal record. Her credibility would be destroyed. No court would give custody to a felon. How did we not know about this investigation? Marcus asked. It was sealed. But Marcus, Margaret paused. There's more. Someone tipped off the FBI with additional evidence. Financial records, communications. The tip came in yesterday afternoon, right after your meeting with Celeste. Who? I don't know, but whoever it was, they just saved you from having to give up that house. Marcus's mind raced. Who would have access to Celeste's financial records? Who would care enough to intervene? The answer came to him suddenly, impossibly. Rosa. No, that was ridiculous. Rosa was a housekeeper, not some corporate spy. But even as he dismissed the thought, Marcus remembered something. The day Rosa had started, Margaret had mentioned that she'd been vetted by the security team. Had she? Marcus made a mental note to check, but right now he had more immediate concerns, like calling his lawyer to inform him that their opponent had just imploded spectacularly. By noon, Celeste's lawyer had withdrawn the custody motion and the CPS complaint. By evening, Celeste herself had fled to Paris on a one-way ticket, apparently hoping to avoid extradition. The nightmare was over as suddenly as it had begun. That evening, Marcus found Rosa in the kitchen preparing dinner. Isabel was in her room doing homework, Braille reading that she'd been learning at her classes. Rosa, Marcus said quietly, can we talk? She turned, her face calm. Of course, Mr. Hathaway. Did you have anything to do with what happened to Celeste? Rosa met his eyes steadily. I don't know what you mean. The FBI investigation. Someone gave them evidence yesterday, right after I met with Celeste and her lawyer. Perhaps God answered your prayers, Mr. Hathaway. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. I didn't tell anyone I prayed. You didn't have to. Desperate fathers have a certain look in their eyes. I recognized it. Who are you? Marcus asked. Really? Rosa smiled sadly. I'm exactly who I said I was. A woman who's worked with children, who loves them, who wants to see them protected. Sometimes protection requires action. She didn't confirm or deny anything, but Marcus understood that Rosa had secrets, skills, connections he'd never imagined, and she'd used them to save his daughter. Thank you, he said simply. Don't thank me, thank God I'm just his instrument. Later that night, Marcus stood at Isabel's doorway, watching her sleep. Rosa's words echoed in his mind. I've seen miracles. Maybe he had too. He just hadn't recognized them. And maybe, just maybe, there was more to this story than he understood. More to Rosa, more to faith, more to the mysterious ways the universe worked. But those were questions for another day. Tonight his daughter was safe. Tomorrow they would continue building the life they'd started. Everything else could wait. The months following Celeste's spectacular implosion passed in a strange, suspended peace. Marcus found himself relaxing in ways he hadn't in years, the constant fear of losing Isabel finally fading into the background. Celeste remained in Paris, fighting extradition and maintaining her innocence through a rotating cast of increasingly desperate lawyers. The media, which had once been poised to paint Marcus as the villain keeping a loving mother from her child, pivoted dramatically. Now he was the devoted father who'd protected his daughter from a would-be criminal. Marcus hated both narratives equally. Isabel wasn't a story to be told. She was a child learning to navigate her world with increasing confidence, and that was all that mattered. By mid-spring, Isabel was thriving. Her classes at the Lighthouse Guild had evolved from basic mobility to complex problem-solving. She'd learned enough Braille to read simple books on her own, though she still preferred Rosa's storytelling voice. Her world had expanded from the confines of the penthouse to include the park, the guild, and, most recently, a weekly music class where she'd discovered a startling aptitude for the piano. She has perfect pitch, her instructor, a patient woman named Dr. Reeves, had told Marcus after the third lesson. Rare in any child, remarkable in one so young. With proper training, she could be extraordinary. Marcus had signed her up for private lessons immediately. Not because he wanted to push her toward prodigy status, but because he'd seen Isabel's face when her fingers found the keys, the way she lit up when sounds became patterns she could control and reshape. This was hers, her joy, her discovery, her triumph. Rosa had smiled when he told her about the expanded lessons. Music is a language without need for sight, she'd said. Isabel is finding her voice. But Rosa herself had become increasingly enigmatic. In the aftermath of Celeste's downfall, Marcus had quietly investigated his daughter's caretaker more thoroughly. What he'd found was simultaneously reassuring and baffling. Rosa Delgado existed on paper, social security number, tax records, work history, but before 15 years ago, she barely existed at all. A few scattered mentions in Los Angeles County records, a brother named Miguel, who'd indeed become a lawyer but whose online presence was oddly minimal. It was as if Rosa had been created whole cloth in her 30s. Marcus's head of security, Daniel, had been blunt in his assessment. Either she's in witness protection, or she used to be someone else entirely. But boss, whatever she was before, she's clean now. No criminal record, no debts, no associations with anyone questionable. And she saved your kid. That's what matters. Marcus had agreed, but he couldn't shake his curiosity. Who was Rosa Delgado, really? He got his answer on a Tuesday evening in late April, though not in any way he'd anticipated. Marcus had stayed late at the office to finish reviewing contracts for an acquisition in Singapore. By the time he made it home, it was past 9. He expected to find Isabel asleep, Rosa tidying the kitchen or reading in her room. Instead, he found his penthouse filled with strangers. 4 men in dark suits stood in his living room, radiating authority. Daniel was there too, looking uncomfortable in a way Marcus had never seen. And in the center of it all stood Rosa, her face pale but composed. "What the hell is this?" Marcus demanded. One of the suited men turned, flashing a badge. "Mr. Hathaway, Special Agent Torres, FBI. We need to ask Miss Delgado some questions." "About what? She's already given a statement about Celeste Moreau." "This isn't about Miss Moreau," Torres interrupted. "This is about a different matter entirely. Miss Delgado, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say—" "I know my rights," Rosa said quietly, "but I'm not under arrest, am I, Agent Torres? Because if I were, you would have led with that." "So this is a fishing expedition?" Torres's jaw tightened. "We have questions about your involvement with a church in Los Angeles, St. Anthony's on 7th Street, specifically financial transactions between 2015 and 2020 that suggest possible money laundering." Marcus felt the ground shift beneath him. Money laundering. "Rosa." "I volunteered at St. Anthony's," Rosa said, her voice steady. "I helped with their outreach programs. That's all." "You also had signing authority on their accounts that received and distributed over $3 million in that 5-year period, much of it from untraceable sources." "Donations," Rosa said, "from parishioners who valued their privacy. That's not illegal." "It is when those donations come from shell corporations linked to cartel activity." The room went silent. Marcus stared at Rosa, trying to reconcile this accusation with the woman who read bedtime stories to his daughter. "I had no knowledge of any illegal activity," Rosa said firmly. "I processed donations as instructed by Father Mendez. If he was involved in something criminal, I knew nothing about it." "Father Mendez is dead," Torres said bluntly. "Murdered 3 years ago in what was staged to look like a robbery. You disappeared from Los Angeles 2 weeks later, changed your name, moved across the country, stopped using your real social security number." "My real what?" Rosa's composure cracked slightly. Torres smiled without humor. "Rosa Delgado exists, but she's not you. The real Rosa Delgado is a 70-year-old woman living in Tucson. You've been using her identity since 2021, so I'll ask you again. Who are you really, and what are you hiding?" Marcus stepped forward. "Agent Torres, unless you're arresting Miss Delgado, I'm going to have to ask you to leave my home. If you have questions, direct them to her attorney. You might want to reconsider sheltering someone under investigation, Mr. Hathaway. especially given that she has access to your minor child. Rosa has done nothing but care for my daughter with dedication and skill. Whatever you're investigating, it has nothing to do with her work here. Now please leave." Torres looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Marcus's expression must have convinced him it wasn't worth the fight. "We'll be in touch, Miss Delgado. Don't leave the city." After they left, Marcus stood in his living room, feeling the careful order of his world cracking again. Rosa sank onto the couch, her hands shaking. "I should have told you," she said softly. "Before I took this job, I should have been honest." "Who are you?" Marcus asked, not unkindly. Rosa took a breath. "My name isn't Rosa Delgado. It's Maria Vasquez. I was born in Tijuana. Came to the US when I was 17. Everything I told you about my brother was true. He did lose his sight. He is a lawyer now. But I left out the part where we grew up in poverty, where my father worked for dangerous people, where I spent my teenage years trying to keep my family safe from men with guns." "The church," Marcus had said. "St. Anthony S. Were you laundering money?" "No," Maria Rosa shook her head vehemently. "I swear to you, Marcus, I had no idea. Father Mendez asked me to help with the finances because I was good with numbers and he trusted me. I thought I was processing legitimate donations. When he was killed, when I realized that maybe the church had been used for something terrible, I panicked. I ran. I became someone else because I was afraid whoever killed Father Mendez might come for anyone associated with those accounts." "Why didn't you go to the police?" "Because I'm an immigrant, Marcus. Because even though I've been here legally for 30 years, even though I'm a citizen, I know how this works. They don't look for the truth. They look for someone to blame. And a Mexican woman with access to millions of dollars. I would have been convicted before I even got a trial." Marcus wanted to disbelieve her, but he'd seen enough of the justice system to know she wasn't entirely wrong. "So you took someone else's identity and started over," he said. "I paid her, Rosa," Maria said quickly. "The real Rosa Delgado. She's my mother's cousin. She agreed to let me use her social security number for a percentage of my income. It's fraud, I know, but I didn't know what else to do." "And Celeste? The FBI tip?" Maria looked away. "I still have contacts in Los Angeles, people who remember me, who trust me. When I heard what she was trying to do to Isabel, I asked some friends to look into her. They found things. I passed it along anonymously." "You broke the law? Multiple laws?" "Yes. For my daughter. For a little girl who deserves better than what this world tried to give her." Maria met his eyes. "I'll leave tonight if you want. I'll go quietly. But Marcus, I swear, on everything I believe in, Isabel has been safe with me. I would die before I let harm come to her." Marcus believed her. Against all logic, against all reason, he believed her completely. "The FBI will be watching now," he said. "If you stay, this could escalate. I know. They could charge you. Identity theft, fraud, obstruction, who knows what else. I know. And you're willing to risk that, prison, deportation?" Maria smiled sadly. "I have already risked everything by loving that child. Prison is just another kind of risk." Marcus sat down heavily. "I need to think about this." "Of course." She stood to leave, but Marcus stopped her. "Maria, or Rosa, or whatever name you want me to use, thank you for telling me the truth. It's still Rosa, I think. Rosa is who I became. Maria was the scared girl I left behind." After she left, Marcus stood at his window and stared out at Manhattan's glittering sprawl. He should fire her. Any rational person would. She'd lied about her identity, had been involved, however peripherally, in potential money laundering, was now under federal investigation. But she'd also loved his daughter when no one else would. Had given Isabel confidence, independence, joy, had saved them from Celeste's manipulations. How did he weigh those scales? His phone buzzed. Christopher, his brother, had been calling more frequently lately. worried about him. Marcus had been avoiding the conversations. "Tonight," he answered. "Chris." "Marcus, finally! I was starting to think you'd blocked my number. How are you? How's Isabel?" "She's good. Great, actually. Learning piano, making friends at her classes. She's happy." "That's wonderful. And you? You sound tired." Marcus almost laughed. Tired doesn't begin to cover it. "Want to talk about it?" And suddenly, Marcus did. He told Christopher everything. About Rosa, about the FBI, about the impossible choice he now faced. His brother listened without interruption, a skill Christopher had that Marcus had always envied. When he finished, Christopher was quiet for a long moment. "You know what I'm going to say, right?" Christopher finally asked. "That I should fire her immediately and distance myself from any legal problems." "Actually, no. I was going to say that you should ask yourself one question. Does Isabel need Rosa?" Marcus thought of his daughter, of how she'd blossomed under Rosa's care. "Yes." "Then you already know what to do. Everything else is just logistics." "Chris, this could become a scandal. My company, my reputation." "Marcus, when did you become the kind of person who values reputation over his daughter's well-being?" The question hit like a slap. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? You've spent 7 years trying to control everything, trying to build perfect walls around Isabel to keep her safe. But you can't control this. You can only choose what matters more." After they hung up, Marcus went to check on Isabel. She was asleep, her arm draped over the stuffed elephant, her face peaceful. And propped on her nightstand was a framed photo, one of the few Isabel kept in her room. In it, Rosa and Isabel stood in the park, both laughing at some shared joke. Marcus remembered taking it 3 months ago, remembered thinking how natural they looked together. That photo answered his question. He found Rosa in her room packing a suitcase. "What are you doing?" he asked from the doorway. I assumed you'd want me to leave." "Then you assumed wrong. But Rosa, if you stay, things might get complicated. The FBI isn't going to give up easily." "I know. And I can't protect you from federal charges. If they decide to prosecute, my lawyers can help, but there are limits." "I understand. But," Marcus took a breath, "I don't want you to go. Isabel needs you, and apparently, so do I." Rosa's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Hathaway." "It's Marcus. I think we're past formalities." She smiled through her tears. "Thank you, Marcus." "Don't thank me yet. We need to figure out how to handle this, starting with getting you proper legal counsel." Over the next weeks, Marcus assembled a team of attorneys to deal with Rosa's situation. They confirmed what she'd suspected. The case against her was circumstantial at best. The FBI had no evidence she'd knowingly participated in money laundering, and identity fraud, while illegal, was often prosecuted leniently for first-time offenders with compelling circumstances. "They're fishing," his lead attorney told him. "They want her to flip on someone higher up the chain. But if there's no one to flip on, if Father Mendez really was the architect and he's dead, then the case goes nowhere. So we wait them out. We cooperate fully, show she has nothing to hide, and yes, we wait." But waiting turned out to be harder than Marcus anticipated. The FBI's investigation leaked to the press, these things always did, and suddenly Rosa's face was on the evening news, described as a person of interest in a money laundering scheme. The story was too juicy for reporters to ignore. Mysterious housekeeper with a fake identity, working for a billionaire, possibly connected to cartels. Marcus's PR team went into overdrive, issuing statements about Rosa's exemplary character and innocent involvement. But the damage was done. Parents at Isabel's classes whispered. Margaret fielded calls from board members expressing concern. Even Peter, usually unflappable, asked delicately if perhaps it wasn't time to consider alternative arrangements. "She's not going anywhere," Marcus told them all. But the stress was taking its toll. Rosa became withdrawn, quiet. She still cared for Isabel with the same devotion, but Marcus noticed the shadows under her eyes, the way she startled at loud noises. One evening he found her praying in the kitchen, rosary beads wrapped around her fingers. "I haven't seen you do that before," Marcus said quietly. Rosa looked up, slightly embarrassed. "I pray every night, usually in my room." "But tonight it needed to be somewhere else." "Tonight I needed to feel closer to something bigger than my fear." Marcus pulled up a chair. "Can I ask you something? About faith?" "Of course." "You've been through hell, poverty, violence, losing Father Mendez, running for your life, and now this. How do you still believe in a benevolent God?" Rosa smiled. "Because I've also seen miracles. Your daughter Marcus, she's one of them." "Isabel wasn't a miracle. She was born blind." "She was born perfect," Rosa interrupted gently. "Born exactly as God intended. The miracle isn't that she can't see. The miracle is that she's learning to thrive anyway, that she's happy, that she's yours. I don't understand how you can have so much faith after everything." "Faith isn't about understanding. It's about trust. I don't know why bad things happen. I don't know why Father Mendez died, or why Isabel was born blind, or why you suffered through Celeste's cruelty. But I trust that even in the darkness, there's purpose, that we're all exactly where we need to be." "That sounds like resignation." "No, resignation is passive. Faith is active. It's choosing to believe that the story isn't over, that the next chapter might bring redemption we can't yet imagine." Marcus wanted to believe her, but faith felt like a luxury he couldn't afford. Still, over the following weeks, something shifted. The FBI's investigation stalled out, just as the lawyers predicted. Without new evidence, without anyone to testify against Rosa, the case went cold. Agent Torres called once more, asking pointed questions about Rosa's current identity, but Marcus's lawyers shut that down fast. "Unless you're charging her with something, this conversation is over," they'd said. Torres had backed off. By June, it seemed like the worst was over. The news cycle had moved on to other scandals. Rosa's name faded from headlines. Life returned to something approximating normal. That's when Marcus's father called. Richard Hathaway was 81 years old, a titan of industry who'd built the family fortune from steel and shipping. He'd retired a decade ago, handing the company to Marcus, and lived on an estate in Connecticut that resembled a fortress more than a home. Marcus called him once a month out of duty, visited twice a year out of obligation. They'd never been close. "Marcus," his father's voice was still commanding despite his age, "I need you to come to Connecticut this weekend and bring Isabel." "Father, I'm not sure." "It wasn't a request. I'm dying, Marcus. I want to see my granddaughter before I go." The word dying hit like a brick. "What?" "Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors give me 3 months, maybe 4. I want to meet Isabel." "You've never wanted to meet her before?" "I made mistakes," Richard said simply. "I'm trying to correct them while I still can. Will you come?" Marcus wanted to refuse. His father had been cold about Isabel's birth, had suggested more than once that Marcus should institutionalize her, that keeping a disabled child in the public eye would damage the family name. They'd fought bitterly about it, and their relationship had never recovered. But the man was dying. "I'll come," Marcus said, "but if you say one wrong word to Isabel—" "I won't. You have my word." That Friday, Marcus, Isabel, and Rosa drove to Connecticut. Isabel was excited. She'd heard about her grandfather but never met him, and the prospect of a new relative thrilled her. "Does he live in a castle?" she asked from the back seat. "Something like that," Marcus said, glancing at Rosa in the passenger seat. She'd insisted on coming, claiming Isabel might need familiar support, but Marcus suspected she simply didn't want him facing his father alone. The estate hadn't changed. Massive, imposing, designed to intimidate. Richard waited on the front steps, looking smaller than Marcus remembered. Thinner, frailer. but his eyes were still sharp as they took in Isabel. "Grandfather?" Isabel stepped forward carefully, her cane sweeping ahead. "Hello, child." Richard's voice softened in a way Marcus had never heard. "Come here, let me look at you." Isabel approached, and Richard knelt down, an effort that clearly cost him to be at her level. "I can't see you," Isabel said matter-of-factly, "but Rosa says I can use my hands if someone lets me. Can I touch your face?" Marcus tensed, expecting his father to refuse, to recoil. Instead, Richard took Isabel's small hands and guided them to his face. "Of course you can." Isabel's fingers traced his features, the sharp nose, the deep lines around his eyes, the papery skin of old age. "You're very old," she announced. Richard laughed, a rusty sound. "Yes, I am. Very old indeed." "That's okay. Rosa says old people are wise because they've made all their mistakes already and learned from them." "Are you wise, grandfather?" "I'm trying to be." Richard's eyes met Marcus's over Isabel's head, and Marcus saw something there he'd never seen before: regret. They went inside, and Richard gave Isabel a tour of the house, describing everything in detail since she couldn't see it, letting her touch priceless sculptures and ancient furniture that Marcus had been forbidden to even look at closely as a child. "This vase is from the Ming dynasty," Richard told Isabel, guiding her hands over its surface. "Feel how thin the porcelain is, how smooth." "It's beautiful," Isabel breathed. "I can feel the pictures on it. What are they?" "Dragons. They're symbols of power and wisdom." That evening, after Isabel was asleep in one of the guest rooms, Richard asked Marcus to join him in his study. "She's remarkable," Richard said, pouring them both scotch. "Nothing like I expected." "What did you expect?" Marcus asked, unable to keep the bitterness from his voice. "I don't know. Someone limited. Someone tragic. Not a vibrant, confident child who touches Ming vases without fear." Richard sat heavily. "I was wrong, Marcus. About everything. About Isabel. About what her blindness would mean. I let my own prejudices blind me. You told me to institutionalize her. I did. And I've regretted those words every day since. I was afraid that having a disabled grandchild would somehow diminish our family's standing, as if standing matters when you're dying alone." He took a long drink. "You've done well with her. Better than I ever could have." "I haven't done it alone. Rosa has been." "I know about Rosa," Richard interrupted. "Or should I say Maria Vasquez?" Marcus went cold. "How?" "I still have resources, Marcus. When I heard my son's household was being investigated by the FBI, I made some calls. I know everything. Her real identity, her history with St. Anthony Ease, the whole sordid mess. If you're going to lecture me, I'm going to thank her." Richard stood, walked to the door, and called out, "Miss Delgado, could you join us, please?" Rosa appeared a moment later, her expression wary. "Sit," Richard commanded, then softened it with, "Please." Rosa sat, glancing between the two men. "I know who you are," Richard told her. "I know you're using a false identity, that you're under investigation, and I want you to know that I've taken care of it." "Taken care of what?" Marcus demanded. "The investigation. I made some calls, pulled some strings. The FBI's case has been officially closed for lack of evidence. Miss Vasquez, or Delgado, whichever you prefer, is no longer under suspicion." Rosa stared at him. "Why would you do that?" "Because you love my granddaughter. Because you've given her something I never gave my own son. Unconditional acceptance. That's worth protecting." Richard turned to Marcus. "I'm also establishing a trust for Isabel. $50 million managed by trustees of your choosing, to be used for her education, medical care, and living expenses. She'll never want for anything." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Father, don't. This isn't generosity, it's penance. I failed you as a father, Marcus. I was cold, demanding, impossible to please. I made you into someone who couldn't believe his own daughter was worth loving." He held up a hand to forestall Marcus's protest. You love her. I see that. But you also spent years trying to fix her instead of accepting her, just like I spent years trying to fix you. The words landed like blows, each one true. But you're learning, Richard continued, thanks largely to Miss Delgado here, so I'm doing what I can to ensure she stays in Isabel's life. Consider the legal troubles handled. Consider the identity issue resolved. I have people who can make Maria Vasquez disappear, and Rosa Delgado become completely legitimate, if you want. Rosa's hands shook. I don't understand. Why would you help me? Because, Richard said simply, I'm dying, and I want to die knowing I did at least one thing right. Helping you stay with Isabel feels right. That night, after Rosa had returned to her room and Richard had retired to bed, Marcus sat alone in his childhood bedroom and cried for the first time in years, for the father he'd never had, for the one he was trying to become, for all the wasted years of fear and control. His phone buzzed. A text from Christopher. How'd it go with Dad? Marcus typed back. He's dying, and somehow that's making him human. Do you forgive him? Marcus stared at the question for a long time before responding. I'm trying to. The next morning they drove back to Manhattan. Isabel chattered happily about her grandfather, about the vases and paintings he'd let her touch, about how he'd promised to teach her about the family history. He's very sad, though, Isabel said seriously. I could hear it in his voice. Why do you think he's sad? Marcus asked. Because he's been lonely, like I used to be before Rosa came. Lonely is the hardest thing to fix. Out of the mouths of babes, Marcus thought. Over the next weeks, true to his word, Richard made good on his promises. The FBI investigation was officially closed. Rosa received legal documents establishing her identity beyond question. Apparently Richard's connections extended into very high places indeed. The trust for Isabel was established, overseen by trustees who had Isabel's best interests at heart. Richard also called every few days to talk to Isabel, asking about her piano lessons, her classes, her life. He sent her a piano, a beautiful Steinway that barely fit in the penthouse, with a note, asterisk, for my granddaughter, who sees the world more clearly than I ever did. And slowly, impossibly, Marcus found himself forgiving his father. But peace, it seemed, was not meant to last. In late July, on a sweltering Tuesday afternoon, Isabel collapsed during her piano lesson. Dr. Reeves called Marcus immediately, her voice tight with worry. She just went down. 1 minute she was playing, the next she was on the floor. I called an ambulance, they're taking her to Mount Sinai. Marcus left work so fast he forgot his jacket, forgot his phone, forgot everything except the need to get to his daughter. He found her in the emergency room, awake but groggy, Rosa beside her holding her hand. Daddy? Isabel's voice was small. I'm here, sweetheart. What happened? I don't know. Everything went dizzy and then I was on the floor. A doctor appeared, young, competent-looking, with kind eyes. Mr. Hathaway, I'm Dr. Patel. We're running some tests, but I need to ask, has Isabel had dizzy spells before? No, never. Any headaches? Changes in balance or coordination? She walks with a cane, but that's... I mean more than usual. Any deterioration in her mobility? Marcus thought back. Had there been changes? Isabel had stumbled more lately, but he'd attributed that to growth spurts, to clumsiness natural in children. Maybe, he admitted, but nothing dramatic. We're going to do a CT scan, possibly an MRI. Given Isabel's history of optic nerve hyperplasia, I want to rule out any neurological issues. Fear spiked through Marcus. What kind of issues? Let's not speculate until we have images, Dr. Patel said gently. The next hours were agony. Marcus sat in the waiting room with Rosa watching the clock, imagining every worst-case scenario. Brain tumor, aneurysm, some degenerative disease that would steal more from Isabel than sight. When Dr. Patel finally emerged, her face was carefully neutral. The CT scan showed something. We're going to need the MRI to be certain, but there appears to be a mass pressing on Isabel's brainstem. It's small, but it's causing pressure that could explain the dizziness and fainting. A mass? Marcus felt numb. You mean a tumour? Possibly. We won't know until we biopsy. But Mr. Hathaway, if it is a tumour, depending on its location and type, it might actually explain Isabel's blindness. Marcus went very still. What? Optic nerve hyperplasia is typically congenital, present from birth, but occasionally it can be caused by pressure from growths in the brain. If this mass has been there since Isabel was born, it could have compressed her optic nerves, causing the blindness we attributed to a developmental abnormality. Are you saying... Marcus couldn't finish the sentence. I'm saying it's possible that if we can safely remove this mass, we might be able to restore some or all of Isabel's vision. The world tilted. 7 years. 7 years of accepting Isabel's blindness as permanent, immutable reality. And now this doctor was suggesting it might have been preventable. Reversible. But you said might, Rosa said quietly beside him. Not will. Dr. Patel nodded. The surgery would be incredibly delicate. The mass is near critical brain structures. There's risk of stroke, paralysis, or death. And even if the surgery is successful, we don't know how much damage has been done to the optic nerves. They might recover partially, fully, or not at all. So we could lose her, Marcus said. Or she could gain sight, Dr. Patel countered. Mr. Hathaway, I know this is overwhelming. You'll need time to think, to consult with specialists. But if that mass continues growing, the dizziness and fainting will get worse. Eventually, it could cause more serious neurological damage. Surgery is risky, but doing nothing is also risky. After the doctor left, Marcus sat with his head in his hands. What do I do? He asked Rosa. I don't know, she said honestly. But you're asking the wrong person. You need to ask Isabel. She's 7 years old. She can't make this decision. She can tell you what she wants, though. She can tell you if the possibility of sight is worth the risk. Marcus wanted to argue, but deep down he knew Rosa was right. That evening, after Isabel had been admitted for observation, Marcus sat by her hospital bed and told her everything. There's something in your brain, he said carefully. A growth that shouldn't be there. The doctors think it might be why you can't see. Isabel listened quietly, her face thoughtful. If they take it out, I might be able to see. Maybe. Or maybe not. The surgery is dangerous, sweetheart. Very dangerous. Could I die? Marcus's throat closed. Yes. Isabel was quiet for a long time. Then, Daddy, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you want me to see? The question gutted him. I want you to be happy, Isabel, however you are. But do you want me to see? She pressed. And Marcus realized this was the test, the real test of whether he'd truly accepted his daughter as she was. No, he said finally. I don't need you to see, sweetheart. I love you exactly as you are. If you never see a single thing, you're still perfect to me. Isabel smiled, and Marcus saw tears on her cheeks. I want to try, she said softly, not because I think I'm broken, but because I'm curious. I want to know what colors look like. I want to see your face, and Rosa's face, and my grandfather's face. I want to know what I've been missing. Even if it means risking everything. Even then. Because Daddy, Rosa taught me something. She taught me that scared doesn't mean stop. It just means be careful. Marcus looked at Rosa, who was crying silently. All right, he said. We'll do the surgery, but on one condition. What? If something goes wrong, if things don't work out the way we hope, you have to promise me you'll keep being brave. Keep being you. Can you do that? Isabel reached for his hand. Only if you promise the same thing. They scheduled the surgery for 3 weeks later, time enough to assemble the best surgical team money could buy. Marcus consulted with 14 different neurosurgeons before settling on Dr. Sarah Chen, a specialist in pediatric brain tumors with a reputation for miracles. I won't lie to you, Mr. Hathaway, Dr. Chen said during their consultation. This is one of the most complex surgeries I've ever attempted. The mass is benign, good news, but it's wrapped around blood vessels that supply critical brain regions. One wrong move and Isabel could have permanent damage, but if I do nothing, it will eventually kill her. And her vision. If the optic nerves are intact, if they haven't atrophied completely, there's a chance, maybe 30%, that she'll regain some functional sight. But I want to be clear, the goal of this surgery is to save her life. Restoring vision would be a bonus, not a guarantee. Marcus signed the consent forms with hands that shook. The next 3 weeks were a blur. Marcus took a leave of absence from work, the first in his career. He spent every moment with Isabel, reading to her, playing piano with her, simply being present. Rosa was there too, a constant, steady presence. Richard called daily, his health declining rapidly. I'll be praying for her, he told Marcus, and for you. You're praying now? Marcus asked, surprised. His father had always been dismissive of religion. Fear makes believers of us all, Richard said. Or maybe I'm just hedging my bets. Either way, I'm praying. Christopher visited twice, bringing his family. Isabel delighted in meeting her cousins, 3 rambunctious children who treated her blindness as no more remarkable than freckles. Uncle Marcus, Christopher's oldest son, asked, why doesn't Isabel's eyes work? Because there's something in her brain that doesn't belong there, Isabel answered before Marcus could. But the doctors are going to take it out. And maybe after, I'll be able to see like you. That's so cool, the boy said admiringly. You're like a superhero getting an upgrade. Isabel laughed, delighted. The night before the surgery, Marcus found himself unable to sleep. He stood at Isabel's bedside, watching her breathe, trying to memorize every detail of her face in case he couldn't finish the thought. Rosa found him there at 2 a.m. You should rest, she said. I can't. Marcus, whatever happens tomorrow, know that you've been a good father. You've done everything right. I spent 7 years treating her like she was broken. You spent 7 years learning to see differently. That's not failure. That's growth. What if I lose her, Rosa? What if this surgery? Then you'll grieve and you'll survive, and you'll carry her memory as the most precious thing you've ever possessed. But Marcus, you won't lose her. I feel it in my bones. How can you be so certain? Rosa smiled. Because I prayed. And for the first time in years, I felt an answer. Not words, not a voice, just a peace. The kind of peace that says everything will be all right. I wish I had your faith. Faith isn't given, Marcus. It's chosen. Every day, every moment. You choose to believe that hope is stronger than fear. That's all it is. At dawn, they took Isabel to the operating room. She was calm, calmer than Marcus, squeezing his hand but not afraid. I'll see you when I wake up, she told him. See you soon, sweetheart. Maybe really see you, she said with a small smile. Then they wheeled her through the doors and Marcus could only wait. The surgery took 9 hours. 9 hours of pacing, of coffee that tasted like ash, of Rosa praying quietly in the corner while Christopher sat beside Marcus offering silent support. Finally, Dr. Chen emerged, still in surgical scrubs. Her face was exhausted but triumphant. She made it, Dr. Chen said, and Marcus collapsed back into his chair. We removed the entire mass. It was touch and go a few times. The bleeding was more extensive than we anticipated, but she's stable. She's in recovery now. And her vision? Marcus asked. We won't know for several days. The optic nerves are intact but damaged. They'll need time to heal if they're going to heal at all. But Mr. Hathaway, Dr. Chen smiled. Your daughter is a fighter. During the surgery, her vitals stayed rock solid. It was like she was determined to prove she could do this. They let Marcus see Isabel an hour later. She was unconscious, her head wrapped in bandages, machines beeping softly around her. But she was alive, breathing, fighting. Marcus took her small hand and held it like a lifeline. You did it, sweetheart, he whispered. You did it. Over the next days, Isabel drifted in and out of consciousness. Each time she woke, Marcus was there. So was Rosa, reading to her, singing softly, simply being present. On the third day, Dr. Chen came in to remove the bandages covering Isabel's eyes. I want to be clear, she said. Even if the nerves have started healing, it will take weeks or months before we know the full extent of recovery. She might see light and shadow. She might see shapes. She might see nothing at all. I understand, Marcus said, though his heart hammered against his ribs. Dr. Chen carefully unwound the bandages. Isabel's eyes had been closed throughout, but now Dr. Chen gently touched her eyelids. Isabel, I'm going to ask you to open your eyes very slowly. The lights in here are dim, but even that might be overwhelming if your vision is returning. Ready? Isabel nodded. She opened her eyes. And then she screamed. Not in pain, in shock, in overwhelming sensation. Her hands flew up, covering her face. Too much, she gasped. Everything's too much. Doctor. Chen immediately dimmed the lights further. It's okay, Isabel. You're okay. What you're experiencing is normal. Your brain is getting signals it's never received before. Can you try again? Very slowly this time. Isabel lowered her hands, squinting. Her eyes, Marcus realized with a jolt, were actually focusing, pupils contracting in the light. I see, Isabel whispered. I see something. Shapes, colors. Yes, sweetheart, Marcus said, his voice breaking. Those are colors. Isabel turned toward his voice, and her eyes, her beautiful working eyes, found his face. Daddy, her voice was awed. Is that you? Yes, baby, it's me. Tears streamed down Isabel's face. You're... She reached out, touching his face with her hands like she'd done so many times before. But now her eyes tracked the movement. You look like I imagined, but also different. Sadder. Marcus laughed through his own tears. Happy tears, sweetheart. These are happy tears. Isabel looked around the room, her gaze catching on Rosa. Rosa. Rosa, you're beautiful. Rosa was sobbing openly. Hello, mi amor. Welcome to the world of seeing. It's so much, Isabel said, her voice overwhelmed. So much information. How do they process all of this? One thing at a time, Dr. Chen said gently. Your brain will adapt. For now, we'll keep the lights dim and limit visual stimuli. But Isabel, she smiled, this is remarkable. Your vision is returning. How much will determine over time, but this is a very, very good sign. That evening, after the doctors had run their tests and Isabel had fallen into exhausted sleep, Marcus stood at the hospital window and looked out at the city lights. You're crying again, Rosa said, appearing beside him. I didn't think it was possible, Marcus admitted. I'd accepted that she'd never see, made peace with it. And now you get a miracle, Rosa said simply, the kind I've been praying for since the day I met her. Marcus turned to her. You knew this would happen. No, I hoped. I prayed. I had faith. But I didn't know. That's what faith is, Marcus. Hoping for things you cannot yet see. And now Isabel can see. Yes, but Marcus, Rosa's expression turned serious. This will change her. Vision opens new worlds, but it also closes others. The way she experienced the world before, that heightened awareness, that will fade. She'll gain sight but lose some of the clarity she had in darkness. Make sure she knows that what she had before was valuable too. Marcus nodded, understanding. Isabel wouldn't just be gaining something, she'd be losing something too. A part of her identity, her way of experiencing the world. They'd have to navigate that carefully. But tonight he was just grateful she was alive. The rest, they'd figure out together. Isabel's recovery was slow but steady. Her vision improved daily, first light and shadow, then shapes, then details. Colours fascinated her. She spent hours staring at simple objects, describing them with the wonder of someone seeing a sunset for the first time. "Red is angry," she announced one day, "but also warm, like a hug from fire." "That's poetic," Rosa said. "Blue is sad but also calm, like the feeling just before you fall asleep." She struggled with distances, with depth perception. Once she tried to walk without her cane and crashed into a wall 3 feet in front of her. "Seeing doesn't mean seeing well," Dr. Chen explained. "Her brain is still learning to process visual information. It might take months or even years before her vision is anywhere near normal." But Isabel was determined. She practiced daily, using both sight and the skills she'd learned while blind. She kept her cane, kept using the clock method for meals, kept all the strategies Rosa had taught her. "Just because I can see doesn't mean I should forget how to be blind," she told Marcus seriously. "That's still part of who I am." Marcus marvelled at her wisdom. 2 weeks after the surgery, they brought Isabel home. She stood in the penthouse living room and slowly turned in a circle, taking everything in. "It's so big," she breathed, "and so empty. All this space." "Does that bother you?" Marcus asked. "No, it's just different than I imagined. I thought it would feel full because I always heard so many echoes. But it's empty full, like a room holding its breath." Rosa had prepared Isabel's favourite meal, cinnamon pancakes, even though it was evening. They sat at the dining table and Isabel stared at her plate. "They really do look like butterflies," she said, delighted. Then her face fell. "But they're not as pretty as I imagined." "Why not?" "Because imagination is perfect," Rosa said gently. "Reality is messier. But messy can be beautiful too, mi amor. You just have to learn a new kind of beautiful." That night, Isabel asked Marcus to come to her room. She was sitting up in bed, her new eyes, still adjusting, still learning, turned toward the window. "Daddy, can we turn off the lights? I want to try something." Marcus switched off the lamp. The room fell into darkness, illuminated only by the city glow filtering through curtains. "That's better," Isabel sighed. "The darkness is easier, quieter." "Does that scare you?" Marcus asked. "No, it feels like coming home." She turned toward where he stood. "Daddy, I'm glad I can see, but I'm also glad I was blind. Does that make sense?" "Yes, sweetheart. It makes perfect sense." "Good. Because being blind taught me things, important things, like how to listen really well, how to trust people, how to imagine. I don't want to forget those lessons just because I can see now." Marcus sat on the edge of her bed, overwhelmed by his daughter's clarity. She was 7 years old, and wiser than he'd been at 40. "You won't forget," he promised, "because those lessons are part of who you are, not just what you could or couldn't do." Rosa says that too. She says we're all more than our abilities, that who we are is about how we love, not what we can do. Rosa's very smart. She's leaving, isn't she? The question came out of nowhere, landing like a punch. "What?" "No." "Why would you think that?" "Because her story's over. She saved me from my mother. She helped me learn to be independent. She stayed for my surgery. Now I can see. That's a good ending for her part of the story." Marcus felt panic rise. "Isabel, Rosa isn't going anywhere, I promise." But even as he said it, he wondered if Isabel had sensed something he'd missed. The next morning he found Rosa in the kitchen packing her things.